The CEO, surrounded by his top-tier engineers, watched as the system imploded. Yet it was the cleaning lady's 10-year-old son who quietly stepped in, solving the insoluble. Less than 5 minutes to showtime, chaos erupted within Halcyon Metric's glass-walled control room in Tempe, Arizona. The air had been thick with tense confidence. Screens pulsed with dashboards and tech leads muttered into headsets. Renwick Dorsey stood at the heart of it, arms crossed, his gaze famously cold and calculating. This launch had to be flawless. Investors from 2 countries were watching live. Reporters already in the hallway prepped for their tech previews. Even city council members invited for PR, sipped catered coffee, staring through the glass like children at an aquarium. The product was Nimbus Core, a cloud infrastructure manager, envisioned as Halcyon's future. The platform to transform them from a promising disruptor into a household name. Millions had poured into its development. Billboards, training, and 2 acquisition offers already floated based on the beta alone. Then with just 3 minutes and 14 seconds left, it happened. Every screen flickered, then went dark. The massive 4K wall monitor emitted a faint pop. The lights held, but the air felt charged as if a hidden wire had snapped. Renwick initially remained still, his gaze fixed. "Are we doing a controlled reboot?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. No one replied. He turned. "Is this a simulation?" "No, sir," someone mumbled. "This is real." The distant hum of the AC and muffled press chatter suddenly amplified in the silence. Lars Petrov, a young systems engineer, hunched over his terminal. "I think it's the cache servers. They've gone into recursive boot and the failover didn't engage." "What do you mean it didn't engage?" Renwick snapped. "It's automated. That's what we paid for. What you swore would work." Lars stammered, eyes wide. Kendra Silas, a senior developer, leaned in, her fingers furiously scrolling, as if trying to extract answers from the screen. "It's not just the cache. The load balancers are glitching too. This makes no sense." "It's not the hardware," a voice from the back offered. "We ran full diagnostics at 6 this morning." Renwick advanced toward the dark screen as if his presence alone could compel it to reboot. "Get the backup node up," he barked. "Trying," Lars replied, typing faster, "but the watchdog timer isn't releasing control." A tech to the left cursed softly. Another opened Slack, typing frantically to a remote team. "This can't be happening," someone whispered. Outside the glass, a city councilwoman from Mesa raised an eyebrow, and a tech reporter began filming on her phone. Renwick spun back to his team. "You have 90 seconds or we pull the launch." "Sir," Kendra began, but he held up a pale, clenched hand. Renwick's legendary temper had only broken once, in 2017, after a failed funding round that led to 3 terminations, a lawsuit and a slew of NDAs. This felt worse. "Restart the core, kill everything except security protocols," Kendra urged. "It might buy us enough time to clear the stack and push through on raw input." But even as she spoke, everyone knew they were improvising, guessing, throwing desperate ideas at a digital wall, praying something would stick. Out in the hallway the mood shifted. Nervous glances, darkened screens, and raised voices were noticed. A journalist mouthed, "Something wrong?" Meanwhile, around the corner, a quiet pair of sneakers and a lunchbox approached the brewing storm. Odessa Brinkley was kneeling, refilling the paper towel dispenser in the second-floor restroom. Her back ached more than usual. Perhaps the cheap new mop heads or just one of those days. She didn't really mind cleaning. It had been her life since leaving Artesia, New Mexico with a suitcase, a bus ticket, and her son still unborn. Odessa was fast, methodical, and invisible as custodians were expected to be. She'd learned to glide, gather what others left behind, and vanish before being noticed. Except today she wasn't alone. Her 10-year-old son Truett sat cross-legged on a plastic chair near the staff lounge, a half-eaten orange in one hand, his battered old tablet in the other. The cracked corner made the screen flicker, but Truett had rigged the settings, even rewiring the power adapter himself. Odessa poked her head out. "You okay, baby?" Truett didn't look up. "Yeah, almost done rewriting the packet parser. The last one was dropping fragments." She smiled softly. She rarely understood his tech talk, but she knew when he was happy. This was his play. Other kids built Lego, Truett debugged test environments. "Want the second orange?" she asked. He shook his head, eyes on the screen. Too much sugar. She chuckled. You sound like an old man. Nah, he said. Old men still think Ethernet's faster than Wi-Fi. That made her laugh. They didn't have much. Odessa worked 2 shifts and their small apartment near Apache Boulevard ate most of her check, but they were okay. Truett got straight A's except in P. He hated running, called it inefficient movement. Most days he stayed with her sister, but today, school closed early due to a burst pipe. Her sister couldn't take him, so Odessa told her supervisor the truth. Truett came with her or she'd miss the shift. She expected resistance, but the building manager waved it off. As long as he doesn't break anything, he'd said. So here they were. The company upstairs was doing something big today, something technical. Odessa wasn't sure what, but she'd seen the signs. Elevator notices, Halcyon Metrics product launch posters, men in ties, women in heels, all of it feeling like another world. A loud voice echoed from the hallway. Odessa glanced over. Something was happening. Truett's head tilted slightly, he'd caught the shift too. Urgent footsteps, clipped voices. That tense energy buildings acquire when something goes wrong. He set the orange peel on a napkin and stood. Odessa raised an eyebrow. Don't go bothering anybody. I'm just curious, he said. Curiosity gets kids in trouble. But she didn't stop him. She watched him walk away, backpack still slung, tablet tucked under his arm like an extension of himself. He didn't fidget. He walked with that quiet, focused rhythm he always had when deep in thought, his feet just following his brain. She looked back at the paper towel dispenser, then to the hallway where he'd vanished. Lord, she muttered, please don't let this boy embarrass me. What Odessa couldn't know was that her son wasn't heading for trouble. He was heading straight into the heart of a breakdown no one in that building knew how to fix, and he had ideas. But when Truett stepped through those glass doors, no one was looking at him. Not yet. Truett entered the hallway leading to Halcyon's main control room, his eyes scanning everything. He didn't know job titles or what half the blinking lights meant, but he sensed something was fundamentally wrong. You didn't need credentials to read panic. He saw it in the pacing, the clutching of phones, the eerie silence of a room that should have hummed with confidence. He slipped closer, hugging the edge of the corridor. His soft-soled sneakers with their peeling outer edges made no sound today. From just outside the doorway, Truett had a clear view into the glass-walled control center. A dozen or so people in lanyards were glued to screens, their mouths moving but words unspoken. Some typed furiously, others stood with that frozen look adults get when they're utterly lost. Then Truett spotted the man at the center. Tall, suited, with a perpetually unsmiling jaw. He was barking orders at a younger man hunched over a laptop. That had to be Renwick Dorsey. Truett's fingers tightened on his tablet. He recognized a few of the programs on the screens, interfaces he'd tinkered with last summer while teaching himself to build mock servers. They were using a multi-instance stack routing protocol, looked like a high-speed failover model. He squinted at the log scrolling on the nearest screen. Yep, something was definitely looping. He stepped a little closer, just enough for the sliding door sensor to click. No one turned. They were too engrossed in their own disaster to notice a small kid, almost barefoot, near a crisis. Hey, Truett said quietly, addressing the woman with big glasses near the second monitor bank. I think your load balancer isn't releasing memory fast enough. It's overloading the watchdog process. She looked over, blinking as if she hadn't registered what she was seeing. What? Your watchdog timers are in conflict with the last cached snapshot. It's stuck in the same loop. You're just stacking instances of the same corrupted data. A guy in the back half laughed. What? Who are you? Whose kid is this? Truett didn't answer. Instead he pointed to the diagnostic logs. Right there, he said. See the error code segfault 2048? That's a memory access violation from a redundant call. 2 engineers glanced at the screen. Kendra Silas moved closer, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. Wait a second, she said. He's not wrong. Come on, the laughing guy scoffed. He's a kid. That's probably just a guess. Yeah, well, that guess might be better than anything we've said in the last 5 minutes, Kendra retorted, her eyes fixed on the screen. Truett stepped forward, holding up his tablet. I've been building mock versions of cloud systems on this, he said. You're using a modular kernel with dynamic instancing, right? A heavy pause. Renwick spun sharply, finally realizing the room was reacting to something he hadn't caught. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Who brought a kid in here?" Kendra slightly raised her hand. "He just pointed out a memory conflict in our core process. I think he might have found the bottleneck." Renwick narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me the room full of engineers I pay six figures couldn't solve this, and a 10-year-old just walked in off the floor with the answer?" Truitt didn't flinch. "I didn't say I had the answer. I said I saw the error. There's a difference." The room fell silent again. Then Lars, the systems guy, started typing. He replicated the error on his console. The error logs matched Truitt's call. Kendra glanced up. "What's your name?" "Truitt Brinkley." Renwick looked past him through the glass door. Just outside, Odessa stood frozen, a trash liner clutched in one hand, her face a blend of horror and something caught between fear and disbelief. But no one asked her to leave. Not yet. Something was shifting and Truitt hadn't even touched a keyboard. The tension in that control room didn't break. It twisted. Renwick clearly disliked being caught off guard. His lips subtly curled before he spoke, as if the idea of being outsmarted by someone he hadn't vetted personally offended him. "All right," he said slowly. "If you're so sure about this loop, tell us what we do next." Truitt shifted his tablet and stepped toward the nearest console. He didn't touch anything, just looked. "You need to bypass the watchdog," he said, calm as if answering a class question, not defusing a crisis. "Not kill it, just isolate the trigger so it stops cycling the corrupted node." Kendra stood beside him, her fingers already typing. "You're saying we need to force the system to skip the snapshot?" Truitt nodded. "Yeah. And then hard purge the cache index. If you try to relaunch without that, it'll just trip again. That's why your failover didn't work." Lars leaned in, trying to keep up. "That'll clear the load balancers?" "It should," Truitt said. "You're bleeding memory across two linked nodes. Neither can complete the handshake because they're getting identical error feedback." Kendra's eyes widened slightly. That's why the watchdog kept triggering. It thought the system was still in pre-init. Renwick still wasn't convinced. His voice lowered. "You realize if this goes wrong, we tank a launch that's already on the edge." Truitt looked up at him, face steady. "I know. But if you do nothing, it's already tanked." Kendra didn't wait. "Back up the root instance," she called to Lars. "Manual override. Let's isolate the kernel and run a soft wipe on the local cache." Someone on the side muttered, "Are we seriously letting a kid run our launch now?" "No one's letting anyone do anything." Kendra snapped. "We're out of time. We've tried everything else." The room erupted with activity, but this time the energy was precise, focused, not panicked. No music, no clapping, no motivational speeches. Just fingers flying across keys, code streaming across screens, and technicians barking status checks. Odessa remained frozen just outside the room, hands still clutching that trash bag as if it anchored her. She could hear every word, unable to move. Someone finally opened the door and she took a cautious step inside. No one asked her to leave. That was new. On the screens, the new instance loaded. Kendra ran a system integrity test, then another. The logs were clean. Connection stabilized. Lars confirmed. Renwick blinked. "Backup node online." Lars said. "System-wide latency dropped by 60%. She's holding." A beat of silence, then the main console lit up. The launch sequence came back online, the wall monitor blinked into full display, and the UI flowed as if nothing had ever gone wrong. The press outside remained blissfully unaware of the near flatline. Kendra turned to Truitt, stunned. "How did you even know where to look?" He shrugged. "I saw the same glitch during a simulation I made. Took me 3 weeks to figure it out. Thought it looked familiar." Renwick was still processing. His eyes darted between his team, the screens, and this quiet kid who had just defused a live corporate disaster with a second-hand tablet and a juice-stained t-shirt. The room was silent. No one quite knew what to say. That's when Odessa stepped forward, her voice trembling. "That's my son." Everyone turned. She didn't smile, didn't boast, just stated it like a fact, too obvious to need explanation. No one spoke for a moment because what could they say? But Renwick didn't thank him. Not yet. He just stared as if still calculating what Truitt had cost him or what he might be worth. There was something surreal about the stillness after the system recovered. Not frozen, not stunned, just quiet, as if afraid to move too fast and break the magic. Screens glowed, metrics streamed in real time, the launch portal active, clients logging in. In the hallway, the crowd of press and VIPs remained oblivious to the near catastrophe. Renwick Dorsey didn't move immediately. He kept staring at Truett as if the boy were a complex math problem he couldn't solve. "Start the launch feed," he finally said, his voice clipped. "Go live in 30 seconds. Kendra gave a curt nod, turning back to her screen. "Lars, you're green across nodes. Fully restored, nothing's hanging, backup protocols stable." Lars said, still sounding surprised. Odessa stood just inside the threshold, unsure if she belonged. No one had asked her to leave, but no one had invited her in. "Ma'am?" someone softly called from behind her. She turned. It was a middle-aged woman in a visitor's badge, well-dressed, clipboard in hand, probably peer. "I'm sorry, you can't be back here. This is a restricted." Renwick waved a hand without looking. "She stays." That silenced the room faster than the crash had. Odessa blinked. She didn't ask questions, just quietly stepped aside, folding her arms across her chest, as if making herself smaller might somehow shield her son from the burning stairs. Truett stayed close to Kendra, who was already checking live feedback from the platform's first login traffic. "We're getting in-system confirmations," she said. "Clients are accessing dashboards, load times are stable." Renwick finally exhaled, but it sounded more like frustration than relief. "We need to monitor the entire sequence. Next 2 hours minimum." Then he slowly turned to Truett. "How did you know that fix would work?" Truett shifted on his feet. "Didn't know. I saw the pattern in your log. It looked like a corrupted load loop I ran into a few months ago, but you had more traffic, so your failover was just making it worse." Renwick blinked. "You ran into it where?" "My own project. I made a copy of this infrastructure layout last summer. I wanted to see if I could build a test environment with, what hardware?" Truett lifted his tablet. "Just this. And an old ThinkPad my aunt gave me." "You're kidding," someone muttered, but Truett wasn't smiling. Renwick rubbed his jaw, then glanced at Odessa. "You trained him." She scoffed lightly, folding her arms tighter. "No, sir. He trained himself." Silence again, but this time it felt different, as if everyone awaited the next shoe to drop. One of the board members, Merrick Langdon, an older man in a navy wool blazer with a permanent squint, stepped into the room, having just heard the commotion. He looked between Renwick and the monitors. "What the hell happened?" "Temporary glitch," Renwick said smoothly. "Resolved now." Langdon turned to Kendra, suspicious. "Is that true?" She hesitated, then pointed to Truett. "He resolved it." Langdon's gaze dropped to the boy, his face twitching as if unable to compute. "I'm sorry," Langdon said slowly. "Who is this?" Odessa cleared her throat. "He's my son, Truett Brinkley." Langdon looked at her, then back at the screen. "We need to talk about this," he said quietly to Renwick. "No," Kendra interrupted. "We don't talk about it. You all need to understand what just happened. We were seconds away from a catastrophic loss. He saved you." Langdon didn't reply, just frowned and stepped back toward the hallway. Renwick glanced at Truett again, then leaned down slightly. "Ever think about working in tech?" he asked, voice low. "I'm 10, Truett replied. Renwick straightened. "You'd better start thinking." Truett didn't answer. He looked back at his mom as if perhaps this had gone too far. Odessa gave a small nod, not to encourage but to let him know she was still there. But outside that room, word was already spreading. Someone had saved the day, and it wasn't anyone on the payroll. 15 minutes after the crisis passed, the tone inside Halcyon's control room remained off balance. The launch was live, clients logging in, dashboards humming, data flowing seamlessly. But the temperature had shifted, subtle, awkward, uncertain. Renwick stood at the far end of the room, back to the glass wall, arms folded again, in that stance he used when recalculating power, risk, money. He measured people like data points. Kendra Silas sat, one hand on her mouse but unmoving. She kept glancing at Truett, still nearby, clutching his tablet. He hadn't said a word since the system stabilized. Most engineers avoided eye contact, not out of spite, but because none could explain what had just happened. Truett didn't belong here. That was obvious. He wasn't even tall enough to reach the main workstation without a step stool. Yet he saw things they didn't, and worse, he understood them. Renwick finally spoke. I want logs from every instance during the crash. I want code comparisons from 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. And I want a memo drafted right now that explains how this happened. No one moved. Am I unclear? No, sir, Kendra replied quietly, and the others scattered to follow. Odessa stood still. She didn't want to move, didn't know what came next. Miss Brinkley, Renwick said, looking at her for the first time since the system revived. I assume you understand the nature of what your son just did. She raised an eyebrow. You mean saving your launch? A faint twitch in his jaw. Yes, I do. And I assume you understand why that complicates things. She frowned. What's complicated? He helped. He didn't break anything. He didn't touch your property. He gave a suggestion that worked. Renwick clearly disliked being cornered, especially by a janitor. That was clear in the silence that followed. Langdon had returned, now standing in the doorway with two other board members, the kind of people who wore $800 shoes and discussed grit like a coffee flavor. One of them stepped forward, a woman in a sharp pinstripe suit, vernacular. Odessa had seen her name on a placard earlier while vacuuming the executive suite. We'd like to speak to your son privately, she said gently but firmly. Odessa stepped in front of Truitt without hesitation. That's not happening. I assure you it's not. You can assure me all day long, Odessa said, calm but solid. But he's 10. You want to talk to him? You talk to me first. I'm not about to hand my son off to a room full of executives like he's a conference topic. The ensuing silence was heavy. Verna didn't push back, but her eyes darted to Renwick, waiting for him to handle it. He didn't because he couldn't, not without looking like the villain in a story already halfway to the internet. Truitt stepped forward on his own. You can ask me something now if you want. Verna blinked. All right. Do you understand what it is you fixed today? Yes, he said. You had a system recursion error caused by a corrupted cached snapshot. Your load balancers were failing because the watchdog was stuck reinitializing the same instance. Your engineers couldn't fix it because they weren't looking at the root trigger. They were just rebooting the surface. Another silence, this one deeper. Verna looked at Renwick. He's not wrong. Renwick remained unreadable. You want to offer him something? Odessa asked. Say it now. We're considering a scholarship. Some kind of early track for advanced placement, once we vet his situation, Verna said. Vet. Odessa repeated. What does that mean? Standard process. We'd want to evaluate his educational background, environment, support system. You mean check if we're the kind of poor you can be proud of? Odessa said, not angry, just honest. Kendra turned in her seat. You don't need to evaluate anything. He just did something none of us could. That should be enough. But Renwick was already 2 moves ahead and Odessa knew it. This wasn't over. This was only the start. The launch was officially declared a success by the time the sun dipped behind Tempe's dusty orange skyline. From the outside, everything looked smooth, polished, predictable, a rising tech company hitting its mark. But inside Halcyon Metrics, the energy had shifted not just from the crisis but from what it revealed. Most of the team stayed late, not out of obligation, but because no one wanted to be the first to leave. Too many hushed conversations in corners, too many glances cast toward the small figure now sitting beside his mother in a back office, legs swinging, tablet on his lap. Truitt wasn't saying much. He'd answered a few questions, talked about packet transfers, politely declined a muffin, and now he was quiet as if fixing a multi-million-dollar crash had drained him the way PE did at school. Odessa sat beside him, holding his hand in her lap. She hadn't spoken in a while either. Renwick Dorsey stood in a glass-enclosed corner conference room, his eyes on the hallway where they sat. He wasn't alone. Langdon and Verna flanked him. Another board member, Kurt Dilbeck, leaned on the table chewing a pen cap. They weren't discussing the crash anymore. They were discussing optics. If word gets out a janitor's kid saved the launch, we look incompetent, Kurt stated flatly. You were incompetent, Kendra muttered from the doorway. She hadn't meant to speak but the words were out. Everyone turned. Excuse me? Kurt asked, annoyed. You were, she repeated. Every one of us missed the error. Every script failed. I don't care if the kid came from the mailroom, he fixed it. Verna held up a hand. That's not the point, Kendra. No, it is the point. Kendra shot back. You're trying to manage perception, I get it. But maybe, just maybe, it's time you stop pretending genius only shows up in a tailored blazer. Langdon didn't answer. Renwick didn't either. Not because they agreed, but because they weren't sure how to argue without proving her right. In the hallway, Truett looked up at his mom. Did I do something wrong? She squeezed his hand. No, baby. You did everything right. They just don't know what to do with that. A few moments later, Renwick stepped out of the conference room and walked over to them, alone this time, no entourage. Odessa stood as he approached. I'd like to talk, he said. We're listening, she replied. He cleared his throat. We're considering something more long-term for Truett. Not just a scholarship. Something designed to cultivate young technical minds. Exposure to real projects. Early training if he's interested. Odessa didn't speak right away. What do you call it when a boy like mine does what yours couldn't? She asked. Renwick blinked. Excuse me. You all spend millions on programs, recruiting consultants, and today a 10-year-old from a second-floor lounge did more in 5 minutes than half your team. So if you're offering him something, just say it plain. He nodded once. A mentorship. Direct access to our development labs. Structured sessions with our lead engineers and eventually early career placement. He'd be part of something real. Truett finally spoke. Can I still do my own stuff? What do you mean? Renwick asked. I don't want to stop building my own projects. I like working on my tablet. I like making things that aren't just company things. Renwick hesitated but nodded. You'd have freedom. And guidance. Odessa looked at her son. He looked up at her, a silent exchange. You can say no, she reminded him. Truett turned to Renwick. Can I think about it? Another pause. Yes, Renwick said. You can. But just down the hall, someone from the PR team was already drafting headlines. Ones that would erase the uncomfortable parts. The next morning, Odessa woke to 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, and an email from an unfamiliar address. Media inquiries, HR follow-ups, and something labeled, Immediate Opportunity. Internal Talent Discovery Initiative. She rubbed her eyes, still in her uniform from the night before. Truett was asleep on the couch, tablet beside him, a half-line of code unfinished on the screen. He'd fallen asleep debugging his own mini-operating system again. The TV played softly in the background. A local news anchor was wrapping up a segment about Halcyon's historic launch, calling it seamless and flawless. Not a word about what really happened. Odessa didn't expect them to give credit, but she also hadn't expected them to erase it. She picked up her phone and played the second voicemail. It was Veronica Lee. Miss Brinkley, I hope this message finds you well. We're moving forward on our offer for Truett. If you could come in today, we'd like to discuss how to formalize it. The voice was friendly, polished, but it didn't sit right. Later that afternoon, Odessa and Truett sat in the HR conference room across from Verna and a young man in glasses who introduced himself as Nathan Royce, Halcyon's internal legal counsel. We've drafted a non-disclosure agreement, Nathan said, sliding a packet of papers across the table. It's standard, just to make sure no sensitive information is shared outside the company. Odessa didn't pick it up. So you're asking him to sign something that says he can't talk about what happened? It's routine, Verna cut in. It protects everyone involved. He's 10, Odessa said. Nathan offered a corporate smile. We understand that. You'd be signing on his behalf. What happens if we don't? She asked. Verna's expression didn't change, but her tone cooled. Then we'll have to re-evaluate what we're able to offer. Truett's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest of his chair. He looked uncomfortable now, not from the tension, but because he understood what was being asked. They want me to forget I helped, he said softly. No, sweetheart, Odessa said gently. They want everyone else to forget you helped. Nathan straightened his tie. Miss Brinkley, we're not trying to diminish anything. This could open doors for Truett, big ones. We're offering him a real path into this industry, one most kids his age never get. At the price of silence? Odessa asked. Verna sighed. With all due respect, this isn't about hiding the truth. It's about managing perception. And how's that worked out for you so far? Odessa asked, her voice steady. Truett stood up. I don't need the deal. Everyone looked at him. I already know how to build things, he said. I don't need permission. Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but Verna raised a hand. Wait, she said. Truett, Are you saying you don't want to work with Halcyon? I'm saying, he replied, I don't want to be used by Halcyon. Silence. Even Odessa looked at him, surprised by the strength in his tone. Verna folded her hands. We're not trying to exploit you. We're offering something special. Odessa finally reached for the NDA and flipped through it. There's nothing in here about tutoring or curriculum or mentorship. It's all about liability control. She closed it. I think we're done here. Verna gave a small nod. That's your choice. But this is a one-time offer. Odessa stood. Then you should have made it with two hands, not one holding a gag order. They walked out together. Nobody stopped them. Back in the car, Truett buckled in and sat quietly for a minute before he spoke. You mad? She looked over at him. No, I'm proud. They're not gonna help me now. You don't need help from people who wanna hide you, she said. You've already helped them and they know it. But down the street, in a small co-working space, someone had just read a leaked thread about the launch and they weren't going to let the truth disappear. By the end of the week, the name Truett Brinkley had begun appearing in places Odessa never imagined. Reddit threads, obscure tech forums, even a few anonymous LinkedIn posts from people who witnessed the launch hiccup firsthand. The full story hadn't broken yet, but it was leaking bit by bit. Someone uploaded a blurry cell phone video taken through the glass of Halcyon's control room. You couldn't see Truett's face, but you could hear his young, calm voice explaining the memory loop error while grown engineers leaned in like students. The video went viral on 2 dev subreddits in under 12 hours. By Sunday night, a small tech blog out of Flagstaff posted an article, Who Really Saved Halcyon's Launch? And by Monday morning Odessa's inbox had changed. No more cold legal language, no more vague follow-ups. Now it was journalists, podcast producers, college outreach coordinators. 2 independent developers offered to send Truett custom hardware just to see what he'd build with it. Odessa sat across from her son at their little kitchen table, scrolling through one of the emails. Truett was focused on something else. An old motherboard he'd scavenged from a donation box last year, halfway through resoldering the USB input. You want to read these? She asked. I saw a few, he mumbled. I don't think I'm ready to talk to people like that. I just want to work on my stuff. She smiled gently, brushing a flake of solder off the table. Then that's what you'll do. Later that afternoon they went for a walk down East Lemon Street just to stretch their legs. It was quiet, desert breeze, a few birds on power lines. The same streets Odessa had swept clean on her night shifts now felt different, as if they might actually lead somewhere. Halfway down the block, a woman called out from a small co-working space tucked between a bookstore and a vegan taco stand. Hey, are you Truett? They turned. Odessa stepped slightly in front of her son before responding. Who's asking? I'm Rena Duke, the woman said, stepping forward and offering her hand. I run the local branch of Bright Circuits. We mentor youth coders middle school through college. We read about your son. One of our members posted his story. We'd love to have him stop by. Odessa narrowed her eyes. This isn't some kind of show, is it? No cameras, no PR. Just smart kids and good equipment, Rena promised. He'll be in charge of what he wants to do. Truett peeked from behind his mom. You have real gear? Rena grinned. We've got Raspberry Pi clusters, open-source hardware, broken robots that need fixing, and one 3D printer that only works when it feels like it. That got a smile out of him. They visited that same day. The space was small but alive. No marble floors, no glass doors, just white boards full of ideas, half-built drones and tables covered in wires and half-eaten pretzels. Truett blended in fast. By the end of the hour he was helping a high school sophomore troubleshoot a logic error in a self-watering garden bot. Odessa sat on a bench near the window watching through the glass. No one stared at him like he didn't belong. No one handed her forms or whispered about NDAs. They just let him be who he already was. When they walked home that evening, Truett was quiet for a while, like his brain was still spinning. Fun? Odessa asked. Then he asked, do you think I can do something real someday? She looked down at him. Baby, you already did. But the world hadn't seen the last of Truett Brinkley, because while one company tried to bury his moment, another had just lit the path forward. By the end of the month, Truett had found a rhythm. He'd spend afternoons at Bright Circuits helping older students write cleaner code, then come home and work on his own projects. Things nobody asked for, things nobody funded, but things that made him excited to wake up each day. Odessa kept her cleaning job not because she had to but because she liked the normalcy. She liked knowing exactly where her keys were and which hallways still needed buffing. And she liked the quiet way some of the halcyon employees started greeting her differently now, not with a flashy fake smile, but with a respect she hadn't seen before. It wasn't lost on her that it took her son being a genius to get that kind of recognition. One night while washing dishes, Odessa asked him, "Are you glad you didn't take their offer?" Truett nodded without looking up from his laptop. "They didn't want me. They wanted to own what I did." She dried her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "You know, not every open door is the right one." "I figured that out," he said. Then after a beat, "Sometimes you gotta build your own." There was pride in his voice, not arrogance, just the quiet kind that came from knowing what he was worth and not letting someone else write the story for him. Weeks later, Odessa received a letter from a charter school in Flagstaff. Someone from Bright Circuits had recommended Truett for an accelerated STEM program. It wasn't polished or prestigious, but it was hands-on, collaborative, and most importantly, honest. Truett read the brochure twice. "Think they'll let me bring my own code base?" "You can ask," Odessa said. "Worst they can do is say no." He grinned. "Then I'll write a better one." Halcyon never did go public with the full story of what happened that launch day. They released a polished documentary 6 months later, complete with fast cuts, dramatic music and interviews from top engineers praising team synergy and recovery under pressure. Truett wasn't mentioned, not once. But that didn't bother him anymore because the people who mattered did know. The forums that started tagging him in discussions, the college students sending him DMs asking how he learned system architecture at age 10, the teacher who offered to mail him an old server rack just for practice, and the kids at Bright Circuits who now listened a little harder when he spoke. Odessa once told him, "The world's gonna wanna own your gifts. Make sure you never sell the parts they didn't help build." He didn't always understand what she meant, but he never forgot it. It wasn't about fame or headlines or even validation. It was about knowing your worth even when others don't. And the truth? Not every hero wears a badge. Not every genius walks in with a laptop bag and a title. Sometimes he's just a kid in a hand-me-down t-shirt, walking into a broken system with a quiet voice and the answer no one else could see. So, the next time someone tells you that greatness only comes with a degree, a title, or a certain kind of name, think about Truett Brinkley. And remember what's possible when someone refuses to wait for permission. If you felt something in this story, share it and don't forget to subscribe. Someone out there needs to hear it today.